So I actually have what is called a blind fund. That's kind of a high level thing. Not a lot of people know what that is, or you don't even need to know what that is right now. A blind fund means I don't know my next asset that I'm gonna buy, but I'm gonna continue to raise capital so that I have capital available to me when I do find the next asset. Okay, so I decided I'm gonna build the Subto fund. So I've got a big asset that we just closed on 2 days ago in Tucson.
Okay.
And I haven't been there yet. And so whatever you guys want to learn, whether it's multifamily, single family, I could teach you anything today. Anything you want to learn, I'll teach you, whatever it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop by my office. We have 2 offices. I'm going to stop by our Mesa one first, kind of show you what we have there. Then I have an office in Tempe as well, and I'll show you what we have there. And then what we'll do is we'll hit the road, go to Tucson, and we'll end up meeting my asset manager, Jamie, down there.
Okay.
And we're going to walk through a property I've never been to before. So I'm going to ask questions. I've never seen it. We just closed on, I think it's $17 million. And we bought it on seller finance. It's 160 units. And this is the first time I've actually put a fund together. So do you know much about funds?
Like syndication?
Yeah, syndication, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of. I have a fund, not a syndication. There's a difference between the two. So like I have, this is funny. We were going to make a whole YouTube video about this actually. So I have 5 buy boxes, right? So I buy a lot of single family by myself solo stuff. The only thing that I buy is Subto or seller finance. I won't do a cash deal. I just simply don't. And then solo multifamily, same thing. I only do Subto or seller finance on that. And these are me by myself, right? Me and my team, and I probably buy 3 single family homes a week, somewhere around there. 1 to 3 depending on the week. And then solo multifamily, I'll probably buy 25 units a month on average. So some months I'll skip a month and I'll do we have a 43 unit that we just bought the other day, and I haven't bought a small multifamily deal in a couple of months. So like that kind of just averages out. Again, all Subto and seller finance. I'm not using any banks on anything I do. Literally no banks, no credit check. Very rarely do I use any of my own money. Sometimes I will use my own money depending on what we have going on, and that's like a specific situation. And I then do a lot of deals with my students. These deals here are only Arizona, Texas, and Vegas. I will not do anything for my own portfolio if it's just me owning them outside of Arizona, Texas, and Vegas. If somebody sends me a deal in Atlanta, I used to buy a lot in Atlanta. We have about 27 properties in Atlanta. I stopped buying in Atlanta just because I really like my own backyard, and I really love Vegas. They're just easy markets. I will buy any single family deal or multifamily deal with a student anywhere in the country. Even if it's California, I'll buy in California. And what I do is my students come to me and they'll say, hey, I have this lead on this house and it's a Subto or seller finance deal. I could assign it, right? They could wholesale, you know what wholesale is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I could take the contract and I could assign it to a buyer, right? And the buyer could be me, right? Sometimes some of the deals I'm buying from my students. Like Hayel Claro, I bought a deal from her this morning on the west side. I've never seen the house. I just go, oh, interest rate, I don't even care about the purchase price. Interest rate, how much money am I putting into the deal and how much is the cash flow? That's all I care about, right? So she says, well, I have a deal, I have it under contract. I could just assign it to you and make $10,000 to $15,000 on the assignment, but I really put an emphasis on owning real estate. Wholesaling is great. It's a good side hustle, but it's just another full-time job. It's like being a real estate agent. It's like...
That's what we do, is we're a wholesale brokerage.
Okay, cool. So it's just a job, right? You have a job. So like, let's say you decide I want to take 6 months off, or you get let go from your job. What happens? How do you pay your bills next month, right? So I put an emphasis on ownership. And so what happens is I tell my students, I go, guys, go wholesale 10, 15, 20 times. I think we have about 20 Zooms a week. So we teach our students how to wholesale in 2 or 3 of those Zooms every single week. We wholesale, it's great, I do it. But what I do is I go, hey, instead of you assigning the deal to me, how about we go 50-50 on the deal, and whatever the cost to get into the deal, let's say the seller wants $5K, the agent wants $10K, there's closing costs of $10K, whatever it is, I will bring the money to the table for all of that and keep my student in the deal 50%. So they have no money in the deal, and now they get ownership 50%. They get the appreciation, the depreciation, the cash flow, they get the loan, they get everything that a partner would get because they are a 50-50 partner. So I do about 15 of these a month with my student base now, and that, like, we just did a 10-plex in Alaska. We do a ton of stuff all over the place. Like Hawaii, we got a nudist colony in Hawaii yesterday that I'm like, no, dude, I don't want a nudist colony. But we get all sorts of weird stuff, okay? So this is only students, and I really am just trying to put an emphasis on building their wealth rather than, I want them to wake up in 24 months or 36 months and go, dude, I got $7,000 a month coming in. So I really emphasize that, and wholesale is just a way for you to get into that, if that makes sense. Wholesale is really like a good way to pay your bills, and more importantly, understand the mechanics of real estate. And then thirdly, I think the most important part about wholesaling is building a network of people that you're doing deals with. That's it. Outside of that, wholesale, in my opinion, is worthless. It's a worthless business model besides those three things, because it is just like having a high paid job, right? If you're a personal trainer, are you making money if you're not personally training? No. Like, that's a job, right? And people are like, oh, it's a business. I'm like, it is, because you're not working for anybody else, but really you are working for somebody else. You're working for your client. So you technically still have a boss. So even a lot of businesses that we own, I'm still an employee. But real estate, I'm not an employee, right? I have an emphasis on telling these guys, my students, I go, guys, you need to accumulate wealth by having your tenants go and work for somebody else and bring their paycheck home. And we've talked about this in other stuff, but 37% of their paycheck goes to paying down your debt, right? That's real wealth. So that's buy box number 3. Then I also have Subto fund. So I have about 1,800 rentals in my portfolio, and I do have some partnerships and some things inside of that. And I'd say that this is somewhere around $350 million in real estate that I have in my portfolio. I'd say about 250 million of that is mine. Meaning, like, I have a partner named Cody that him and I bought 70 rentals together. I have a partner named Abraham where him and I bought 20 rentals together, right? So if you just take my ownership alone, I'm somewhere around here. And I go, you know what would be cool is if I just go and accelerate my buying power, and I go bring in a lot of partners and we go buy big assets. And so I do have a bunch of big assets. Like, my biggest asset in here is 408 units. I've got a 256 unit. I've got a lot of 40 units. I've got a 53 unit, a lot of 30 units, and then about 300 single family homes in that portfolio. That's primarily me and like one partner. But the Subto fund is different. So the asset that we're gonna go see today is a fund. So what I do is I go, all right guys, I have this thesis that I believe buying 100 unit to 300 unit multifamily apartments and going specifically after seller finance is a really smart business model. Who wants to join me? And so then what I do is I put together a corporation or an LLC, and that LLC is a fund. Do you know the difference between a fund and a syndication?
No.
Okay, so big difference between a syndication and a fund, really simple, is let's say that I have the property already identified. I know the address, 123 West Main Street, okay? 123 West Main Street, I have it identified, I have it under contract. If I'm raising money specifically from a group of individuals like my uncle, my cousin, my grandma, whoever, and I'm raising money for a specific property, that is called a syndication. If I have a thesis of what type of property I want to buy, then I'm putting a fund together. So a fund is not a syndication, and a syndication is not a fund, but the mechanics are the same. The only difference is, do I have a property already identified, or do I have a thesis of what type of properties I want to look for? So I actually have what is called a blind fund. That's kind of a high level thing. Not a lot of people know what that is, or you don't even need to know what that is right now. A blind fund means I don't know my next asset that I'm going to buy, but I'm going to continue to raise capital so that I have capital available to me when I do find the next asset. Okay, so I decided I'm going to build the Subto fund, where the Subto fund allows me to bring in my students and allow them to invest as little as $1,000 in a piece of real estate with me, so that they go, I'm a partner. Let's say you're one of these students, right?
Is that a silent partner or active?
Active would mean that they have responsibilities, right? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, they're not silent, because a silent partner is not allowed to go to the premises. They're not allowed to really bother you or ask you questions. Okay. That's a silent partner. They're active in the sense that they will go to the property. They'll be able to let's say they go talk to another multifamily broker for their own portfolio, and they're talking to this broker. Multifamily brokers don't want to talk to you unless you have credibility and a track history, right? So my students can now say, yep, actually I own 160 units. So for $1,000, they can go and say, I'm a partner in a 160 unit multifamily deal that we purchased for $20 million, blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing, here's the blah, blah, blah. So really the $1,000 investment, is that a retirement amount of money? Like, they invest $1,000 and in a couple of years they double their money? They're not going to retire off that. But I do have investors that put I have an investor wired $1 million to it yesterday, right? So I have large investors that are accredited But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to open it up to my students so that they could have credibility when they go and talk to brokers. And so now they can say, instead of saying, oh, Pace is my mentor, they can actually say Pace. They don't even have to say my name. I don't care. They can just say, I'm partners on this 160 unit deal. And for $1,000, guess what they get? They get to be part of all the calls we have. They get to visit the property with me. They get to hang out with me, and they get a video every month, or they get a call with our asset manager, who you'll meet Jamie today, our asset manager, and they get to ask questions about multifamily. So most people, okay, this is a statistic we found out, if I want to be a master of multifamily, right? I want to be like a badass in multifamily. What we find is the average person that goes through a multifamily learning curve, it costs them about $100,000 to get to a point where they feel like I'm comfortable in multifamily. That $100,000 is usually a $25,000 mentorship, a $35,000 mentorship, a mastermind, a couple of seminars, and they've gone through and met the people that they need to meet that are operating in the field. And so I said, how can I give them all of that by them investing in an actual deal where I don't take the $1,000? The $1,000 goes into buying the actual asset. They become a partner with me, and now they get the full-fledged education. And by the way, are you going to pay more attention to me teaching you about an asset you're a partner on, or some ambiguous bullcrap address that's whatever, it's fake? So this was like one of the most genius things I did in terms of like, how do I accelerate your learning, right? So I made this only available to my community. And so we raised money, and the first asset we've ever purchased was closed 2 days ago. And you guys are going to go visit that, which is rare. I never hang out with non-students, never. Like, I'm allergic to it. I used to do it years ago, but guess what? You guys will just ask me questions that I've answered on my YouTube channel 50,000 times. I'm okay with it. I'm going to do it. We're going to go through it. The reason I told you all of this to tell you how cool this property is and what it means to me. This property, when somebody creates a fund, what's kind of cool about a fund is I can go create a fund and I don't have to have any money in the deal, okay? I can own the fund and have no money in the deal. That's pretty cool. Now, I'm not like most fund managers. I actually am the largest investor in my fund. So you call the person running the fund, you call them the GP, the general partner. You call the people who invest in the deal the LP, the limited partner. So people that are investing in my fund, they are called LPs. Because I run the team, we find the assets, we manage the assets, we are the ones in charge of the exit strategy, dealing with all the things, renovating the property. You guys will see our plan for this property today, and you guys will hear the whole story of it. My LPs obviously get a portion of the deal, okay? We raise, let's say, this is kind of cool how funds work. Check this out. So if I buy a deal for $15 million, typically you're raising about 30% of that purchase price from your LPs, okay? So 30% of this would be 5 mil, right? So I went and raised $5 million for that specific asset, only 30%. So how much of that deal does the LP get? Like the total LP group, how much do they get? What percentage of the deal do they own? 30% was raised for the deal from the LPs. What percent do they get?
Wouldn't it just be based off the amount that they put in?
Yes and no, but what's the percentage?
They're in on the whole deal.
Well, they're in on the whole deal, yeah, but what portion of that deal do they own?
30%.
30% is what you would assume because they brought 30% to the table, right? What you do in a fund is you actually give your investors way more of the pie than the GP gets, okay? So the way it works is we go, yes, we as a total group, we all own the $15 million asset. But when the deal sells for $23 million later down the road, don't you want to know, like, how much of that is my money, right? So the total group of the LPs, which, let's see how many people I have. Okay, I have 55 people in this particular deal. So 55 people gave me $5 million, okay? Those 55 people, you would assume, well, if you only brought 30% to the deal, then you guys own 30% of the deal. So that when we go make, let's say we sell this asset at some point in the future for $23 million, there's an $8 million gain. So you would assume that these people who brought 30% to the table would get 30% of that gain, right? The cool thing about a fund is they actually get the opposite. They get the 70% and the GP gets the 30%.
And why is that?
Because you want to incentivize your investors to invest with you. You want to give them way more than what you're getting. Now, as a GP, the GP doesn't have to put any money into the deal, and they still get 30%. But what did they really put into the deal?
Nothing.
A lot, actually. They found the deal, right? We had to find the deal. We had to negotiate with the broker. This story of this deal was like months and months. I have to have a team that's trained. I have to know how to assemble that team. I have to know how to do all the legal documents. I have to front load those expenses. I have to have an office. I have to be credible. I have to learn how to raise the capital and bundle 55 people together. Not one of those 55 people would have known how to do any of that or even find the other 54 people, right? So my job is to glue everybody together.
Create the opportunity.
Create the opportunity, run the opportunity, and ultimately be the guy that exits that opportunity on the back end. Does that make sense? So Though I'm different. I'm not only in the GP, I'm the general partner, I also am the largest investor in the LP. And I always tell people, if you invest more money as an LP, so I tell the other 55 people, if you invest more money than me, my life is carte blanche to you. You want to come meet Tony Robbins next week, you want to meet Dean Graziosi, you want to meet Mike Tyson, I'm meeting Mike Tyson in 30 days, he's gonna come and hang out with me for the day. If you invest more than me, my life is carte blanche. You can come show up wherever I go, whatever I do, you are welcome to go. And so every month I actually invest more money into the LP to make sure I'm always the largest investor. Why? Well, because I want to put my money where my mouth is. If they're risking their money, I want to risk my money too. And so I'm in that 55 and I'm $1 million of the 5 million just by myself. And by the end of the year, I'll be like $2, maybe $3 million. The goal of a fund is to compound wealth. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Like in a couple of years, what we'll do is this property, which we'll talk about the story of, this property was bought for 15 million on seller finance. The seller originally bought that. When he bought this, he was the one that developed the property. He built it himself. He has not raised the rents like he should have. So they're undervalued rents, and he also hasn't renovated the property. What happens is a lot of these guys, they become tired landlords. What they do is they build an asset or they buy an asset. They were never meant to be multifamily investors. A lot of the people I buy deals from, like these 30 unit, 40 unit deals, they're people that were like, I'm an accountant, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a this, and my financial advisor told me to go deploy my money into multifamily. I accumulated 100 units, and I got to a point where I've been sucking out all the cash flow for 15, 20 years, but I haven't been renovating the property, so the property has been going down in terms of the quality of tenants and the whatever. So instead of me going, crap, now I gotta go put $1 million into this because I should have been keeping up with it for the last 10, 15 years, I now have a significant chunk of money I have to put into this, and I don't wanna do that. So now when they go sell this, they bought, let's say this guy, he built this, but he was all into it $5 million. Over the last 25 years of owning it, he has sucked out all the cash flow of this property to live his lifestyle. Well, cool, he's made a lot of cash flow, but guess what else he made? He made $10 million. Do we know what this gives you if you make $10 million on a real estate transaction? Taxes. He will pay 40% of that in capital gains taxes. Okay, so seller finance, what I provide to them, means they get the full $10 million and more. This is why people sell to you on seller finance. It actually makes no sense to me that somebody would sell to you on cash. Because somebody who's very tax savvy, I haven't paid federal income tax in a long time, I look at that and I'm like, why would you ever sell that $15 million asset to me on cash? Because if I give you that $10 million right now, you just paid $4 million immediately to the IRS and now you have $6 million. Why not seller finance that $10 million to me, spread out that gain and charge me 4% interest, and now you're making 4% interest on $10 million on an asset that you understand. So if I default, not only do you keep all the payments along the way, but you actually get the asset back that you already understand. It's the safest bet for them. Does that make sense? Yeah. So a lot of people will ask me the dumbest question: why would a seller do this? I just told you. When you understand creative finance, the question now becomes, why would a seller not do this? Yeah. Why would a seller stupidly sell their asset and lose $4 million right out of the gate just to have to take that $6 million and go find another safe place for them to make money on? Where are they going to? Now, and the other thing is, if you understand amortization, last thing I'll talk about before I get on this Zoom. If you understand amortization, do you guys understand amortization?
Yeah, isn't that
payments?
Okay, so 30 years, your house pays off, right? So the way I look at it is that first 10 years, that 10-year block that you're paying the property off, you buy it today, it's worth $300K, let's say, okay, $300,000. By the time you've paid 30 years, it's now worth zero. Or I'm sorry, not worth zero, but your mortgage is at zero. But that first year, right, or that first 10 years, it's like 85% of your payment goes to interest. So even though this seller is charging me only 4% interest, when you really think about it, the first 10 years of him seller financing this to me, all of the other years of interest are actually front loaded on the front end. So his effective interest that he receives is closer to 12% interest. Nobody thinks about this. And nobody will teach you that. Nobody in your brokerage knows anything about that. They could never give you a 15-minute breakdown of this. They're dumb. They're so dumb. And so when somebody's like, a seller goes, well, a broker will come to me and go, oh shit. No, it's always something going on.